From a challenge perspective, I see three real key challenges. Um, Typically, when we're looking at data, the data scarcity from a programmatic environment, something that we're often challenged with. And I think when we look at the changes or migration away from cookies, if that eventually happens, our assumption is yes. Identifying the most viable data sets will be really critical for us. So data scarcity is one of them. Lack of transparency, which has been coming up quite a bit in the industry, more so lately with the MFAs, but it's becoming increasingly more difficult to track the data flow across the ecosystem, which is ultimately creating a little mistrust between agencies and DSPs or partners, as well as some of the clients. Not necessarily their distrust with the agency, but just the entire ecosystem. And I would say the last one, which kind of dovetails off the transparency, is the fraud and misinterpretation of impression delivery. This is something that really allowed us in the industry to take a step back and say, okay, we need a full audit of our entire operation to understand what we're buying, how the data is sourced, what inventory from the SSPs is accurate, and are we actually reaching our clients' objectives. So those three, I think, are the top three in my mind right now. But the opportunities, I think, outweigh some of those challenges. Looking at omni-channel approach and certainly measurement to understand truly the full spectrum of the effectiveness of efforts. Originally, programmatic was a few ad placements, really just getting in from an efficiency perspective, and it was just connected pipes to create ease from a media buying perspective. But now we're able to buy programmatically across most screens, most places, and connecting it from an omni-channel perspective is going to be really interesting as publishers and DSPs allow us to do that more effectively. And then, of course, the rise of retail media networks is something really important. So being able to overlay some of that data set onto our programmatic efforts will allow us to get closer to really driving effectiveness and efficiency while looking at things all the way from brand to performance across the entire lifespan of a campaign.
What does programmatic need to do to be seen helping to elevate premium creative and quality attention?
To me, it would start with data quality, really to understand the optimal targeting, because the way we approach it at GSD&M, we really do a lot of the work to understand our audiences, their behaviors, their motivations, and that has a lot of power if done properly. So matching that in a programmatic environment, ensuring that the data quality is the best possible quality out there to ensure that we're reaching the right people, because if you can accomplish that, then you can create the right campaign or ecosystem, connecting them throughout their journey and matching it with the right creative messaging. And I think that's been a big miss, is the creative versioning. So into really another area of it is truly education in a lot of ways, and understanding how you create for the space in programmatic and understanding the programmatic constraints to ensure that you're creating the right messaging at that moment of connecting with an audience across all platforms. Creative innovation from an agency and brand side, I think, also something that should be talked about a little bit more. It's not just the programmatic or the DSP's responsibility. It's us as a collective industry to understand, again, back to the constraints, learning how to build within those constraints, almost looking at it as a mapping and ensuring you're building the right messaging for the screen and the time you're connecting with the audience. And then ultimately, I mean, collaboration across all. So often it's been agency publisher or publisher to publisher, and building a more cohesive relationship between agencies and including brands and the publishers, I think is going to be helpful as we migrate forward and looking at more premium creative at the right time, but certainly figuring out how we can drive quality attention.
So what keeps you up at night as a media buying leader?
So many things. The continued evolution and fragmentation on both the buy side and the audience side. It changes every day, whether it's in the social landscape or the fraud components. Obviously, the cookie migration continues to get pushed, which we have to continue changing our POV and how we're looking at our operation. But I also like to think of it from an audience perspective, because audience attention is fundamentally shifting. younger audiences like Gen Z, Gen Alpha, mostly Gen Z, they have ad blockers on. So how do we build a campaign, or how do we create a conversation with them when they're trying to actively mine their way away from advertising? And so we do the work to understand how to scale campaigns to reach audiences. Like I had said earlier, we put a lot of work into understanding audiences and how they behave and what their motivations are. But to truly understand how you can connect with them in the right moment, it's also important to complement what they're seeing with the right messaging. So I say all that because as their attention changes, what interests them changes. So you can't use the same creative messaging that often, because they're going to be adverse to it. So you need to really understand how you build that connection. Truly understanding the audience and the placement is critical. And that keeps me up at night. We are a full service agency, so we're able to connect creativity to media and performance, and doing so in a really cohesive way, which gives us a lot of benefit in terms of being agile and changing, optimizing things in the moment. But it's really hard to continue to follow audiences' behavior and the shifting of their attention, which is something that keeps me up quite often, actually.
Okay, so many media buyers believe advertising is either pure brand advertising or performance driven, lower funnel marketing. And there's really not enough in between. What's your take?
I don't think it can be one or the other. I think it has to be both. I mean, especially now with shoppable media and broad reach environments, you can't look at things as only brand building or only performance driving. The way we approach it is sales overnight, brand over time, and ultimately all advertising is performance, I believe. How you evaluate it, how you create the content for the space is one thing, but ultimately you're either driving brand understanding, brand favorability, ultimately driving a conversion. We can do that in the same ecosystem. It kind of collapses the funnel in a lot of ways. And that's how we're guiding our clients, is looking at all of those connection points with audiences and looking at them as both brand and performance, or driving conversion. So I don't think you can look at it one way or the other. When we did that, when programmatic was on the rise and a lot of brands migrated more so into programmatic and that real-time performance, they lost a lot of the brand salience, and they started losing a share across their competitive set because they lost sight of also building the brand in relation to driving performance. So it is imperative that you look at it across the ecosystem, both brand and performance.
And just finally, so what are your thoughts on the return of media math?
I think it's really, really great to see them come back, especially under the Infillion brand. Infillion's a very reputable company. They have some great products like TrueX. Um, it's an interesting story on what had happened to Media Math in the past. So it'll be really great to see how Infillion brings it back to life in a new modern way, while rebuilding those relationships and partnerships that were severed in the past.